Hey, Mount Hope. This is Brett. I am back with our next episode of our Cabin Chat series. And in case you have missed the previous episodes, you can go back to our Facebook or our app or our YouTube channel to be able to catch all of those previous episodes. But today, on this beautiful, sunny, kind of nice, cool day, I am sitting on the front porch of one of our girls' cabins named Rachel and Leah. All right, it's actually one of our newer cabins, kind of tucked away, really not actually far from the missionary house, kind of tucked away right behind it. And just a beautiful, beautiful location for a cabin tucked away underneath these trees. But I want to share the story with you out of Genesis chapter 29 and 30. We'll actually read a little bit out of Genesis 28, but in those three chapters is really where we're going to highlight the story. But I want to encourage you, like I do every week, to spend some time devotionally with your family going through the story of Rachel and Leah. And you'll find that in the early to mid parts of Genesis. And specifically today, we're going to look at Genesis 29 and 30. Now, the story kicks off not necessarily with Rachel and Leah. It kicks off with a guy by the name of Jacob. All right? And I'm assuming you probably know who Jacob is, but if not, you may recognize the name of his dad. His dad's name was Isaac, and his grandpappy, Abraham, right? So we have Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's the Jacob we're talking about, right? And we kind of find the details of his story tucked away in Genesis 29 and 30. But in the chapter before that, in 28, we actually find Isaac kind of telling his son, hey, son, it's time to get married. I mean, it's time, all right? That's my interpretation, probably not exactly what Scripture said, but it's time to get married, but don't take a wife from the Canaanites, all right? I want you to go to Padanaram, I guess that's how you say it, but Padanaram and get a wife from your Uncle Laban's daughters, all right? And so that was his charge to his son. Hey, go to Padanaram and get you a wife from your Uncle Laban's daughters. And so on his journey, he stops one night, lays his head on a rock. I'm going to skip the rest of that story because that's actually a name of another one of our cabins. So if you want the details there, that's in the later part of Genesis 28. But I'm going to skip on over to 29. And in 29, on this journey, he comes across this well. It's a common well. Shepherds, the sheep would all water there and take a stop and take a drink and whatever else. But there's this big stone right on the top of the well, and it was massive, right? And so the practice is that many shepherds would wait until many of them could come together, and then collectively they would shove this thing off, water their flocks and whatever else. Okay, so Jacob shows up at this well, and there's other guys there. He's talking to them, finding out where they're from and if they know Laban. And in the midst of the conversation, they do acknowledge that they know Laban and they're from his hometown, right? But the shepherds are all waiting to move the stone. Like they could very perfectly, easily water their animals, but they're waiting because this stone is so massive. It's really interesting how the Scripture kind of paints that picture that this thing is heavy and nobody wants to tackle it by themselves. Until there's this stunning girl that just walks into the story by the name of Rachel, all right? Rachel is a shepherd. She's bringing some sheep. Now, guys, I don't know about you. Any of you single guys here looking for a lady? It's almost like Scripture says, hey, guys, there's nothing quite like a lady with a bunch of sheep. But that's kind of what we get, okay? And so Rachel, with all of her sheep, shows up, and Scripture says that it's in this moment that Jacob spotted Rachel. It was almost like, you've heard it, love at first sight. It's the beginning of a romantic comedy or something here, right? So, but Jacob then desires to impress her, I guess, is kind of the way I read it. He goes over there and moves this massive stone all by himself, right? He later talks to Rachel, tells her that he's basically family, and he gets the invite back to his Uncle Laban's place. Now, he stays there for about a month, and after the month's over, he's talking to Laban, and Laban basically asks him, hey, what do I owe you? What's your payment? What's your wage for the work that you've done for me? Well, in the exchange of that conversation, I think Rachel's name was kind of brought to the forefront. I'll work 7 years in exchange for your daughter Rachel's hand in marriage. Okay, and so that was kind of the agreement. And so 7 years of hard labor for a lady, guys. I'm just telling you, she must have been something special, right? 7 years of hard labor. And I love the way Scripture just says it. Genesis 29, 16 and 17 says, "And Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah." Okay, so this is where we first have mention of Leah. So from our cabin, Rachel and Leah, they're sisters. All right, Leah is the older sister. Rachel is the younger. All right, but then it says this: Leah had, tender eyes, but Rachel was beautiful and well favored. So really what it's kind of saying is Leah had like kind of weak eyes, is kind of other translations, weak eyes, but Rachel was this stunning girl. Like, she was just absolutely beautiful. Okay, so kind of quite a distinct difference here. But then the agreement, right? He's going to work for 7 years. Genesis 29:20 says this: "And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days, for the love he had for her." Oh, doesn't that just sound like some kind of line in some kind of romantic movie? Oh, 7 years just seemed like just a few days for Rachel, because he loved her so much. Well, at the end of the 7 years, what happens is Laban kind of pulls a little switcheroo. All right, the night of the wedding, he gives Jacob Leah instead of Rachel. Okay, yeah, not quite what Jacob was expecting. Laban explained that in their country, they don't marry off the younger before they marry off the older. And so once Jacob realizes what's going on, he approaches Laban, and Laban then agrees, "Well, I'll give you Rachel, but you need to work another 7 years." So a week later, Rachel and Jacob got married, but basically another 7 years he committed for Rachel's hand in marriage. Now, this is where the story kind of moves into just a bunch of kind of like who gave birth to who, okay? Because Rachel had her handmaiden, Leah had her handmaiden, so there's Jacob and basically 4 women. And in the midst of the story, there's this one gave birth to this one, and this one gave birth to this one, and this one gave birth to this one. And the story continues on and on and on. But basically how we have it is Leah gave birth to Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Dinah. Bilhah, I guess is how you pronounce it, gave birth to Dan and Naphtali. Zilpah gave birth to Gad and Asher. And then Rachel gave birth to Joseph, the Joseph of Egypt, right? We'll later learn and read in the end part of Genesis. But I share that very quickly, but here's really kind of what happened, and perhaps the application of the story here. The application I really want to teach, first of all, is there's rejection immediately from the get-go in this story with Leah. You know, Jacob loved Rachel. Scripture says it just that plainly. And so I can only imagine that, first of all, Jacob's working for Rachel's hand in marriage, but he gets Leah instead. Like, Leah's just kind of like the one nobody wants. She's older. She should already be married, but she's not. I don't know about you. I don't know if you have ever been rejected or felt left out, but I can only imagine Leah and the intensity of that rejection. Like, when Jacob, his negative reaction to finding Leah the night of their marriage, it's like a neon flashing sign of rejection. I can only imagine what Leah felt in that moment. And you know, our culture does put a lot of emphasis on the outward appearance. I mean, Scripture even says that Rachel was stunning. Leah, yeah, weak eyes, you know. But I want to remind anybody that feels that way or is thinking that the Scripture has something else to say about that. 1 Peter 3:3 and 4, I love these verses, says this: "Whose adorning, let it not be the that outward adorning of planting the hair and of wearing of gold or of putting on apparel, but let it be the hidden man of the heart, in that which is not corruptible, even the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit, which is in the Spirit of God of great price. So basically what it's saying is there are husbands out there that are captivated, not necessarily by the outward appearance, but what's on the inside. And so ladies, cultivate the inner beauty, the gentle, gracious, kind spirit that God delights in. Cultivate that. And listen, ladies, I think that's absolutely beautiful. And so don't forget that. I think Leah held on to God in the midst of that rejection. I think the naming of her sons kind of testifies to that. But in the midst of rejection, there's also a ton of jealousy in this story. Jealousy, I think probably, first of all, Leah was probably jealous of her sister Rachel, right? She's getting all the attention and I'm not. But then, as the story unfolds, Leah was the one that was able to have children first. She has 4 children right off the bat, and then later has more. And Rachel was barren. She was unable to have children. And Scripture says that she was jealous of her sister. And so jealousy permeated this entire story through here. And I think the truth is that if we aren't grateful for what we have and trust that God really is enough, then jealousy will always leave us wanting more. All right, so in the midst of that, here's my one final thought and truth that I want to leave you with. Is Scripture teaches us even that when Leah was unloved, God saw her and opened up her womb. Okay, that's my paraphrase, but that's really what it's saying is that when God saw her being unloved by Jacob, he wanted to bless her by giving her children, which is what she wanted. And so my application to the Rachel and Leah story is that in the midst of troubles or difficulties in your life, be reminded, be encouraged that God sees. God sees, and he desires to love you and bless you. And so with that, thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of our Cabin Chat series. Check back next week as we'll be back on Boys Hill for our next video. Thanks.